Greetings all, welcome to Everything Borrowed, where we sit down to share stories and have conversations with entrepreneurs to artists and everyone in between. Today's episode is powered by Blake's Hard Cider, 100% fresh pressed, all natural and gluten-free, straight from our family's 75-year-old farm in Southeast Michigan. Find us in your local grocer or have Blake's direct shipped to your home by visiting blakestore.com. Use promo code EverythingBorrowed to receive 10% off your first order. Must be 21 years of age. Please enjoy mindfully. What's up, y'all? My guest today is Burton Heiss, CEO of Buddy's Pizza, home of the original Detroit-style pizza. We get into how he balances life, business, and the pursuit of pizza, and how he's navigating taking a historical family brand beyond the Motor City in the middle of a global pandemic. Burton is a great dude, an amazing entrepreneur, so sit down, grab a slice, and enjoy the pie. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, when you look at your role as CEO, what do you think the most important thing a CEO can do within an organization? What do you look at it as your job? Obviously, you're setting the vision. You talk about how this vision's changing. You're moving to, maybe annual is not even, short enough. It's years, going from a year to quarterly, but as you have taken over the responsibility of managing, Buddies through this pandemic, what do you wake up and really think about every day? And what do you think the role of a CEO in an organization really is?
This is probably too obvious an answer, but it's leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's navigation, it's guidance, it's setting the right tone, it's around judgment, and a lot of times, I'm kind of a contrarian by nature, but I think it's filling in the gaps, maybe protecting us from our blind spots. I mean, you want to have a team around you that kind of knows how to do the day-to-day, but maybe is able to focus on that enough that you need to kind of protect the flanks, be thinking further out down the road. So, again, I think build confidence in the organization, make sure that we have the resources, but that's all rolled up into leadership. That's the game.
I look at what we did, from a Blake's Hard Cider perspective and a Blake Farms, our experiential thing. And the only reason we were able to make out of the year successful, retain all of our employees and continue to add to our team was because we were nimble weekly, and it was exhausting for the team. I mean, I don't know if our team members could have worked any harder, and that was the commitment that they kind of gave to us. But I think when you look at the landscape, I think it's going to be that way, for the next year. You're going to have to continue to stay.
Well, it's interesting. You asked about like carry out and off premise versus dine in, and kind of the fundamentals of the business changing. I think more likely the stickiness of this crisis is going to be the leadership piece, which is the annual plans are going to be a thing of the past. It's going to be almost like when retailers went to just-in-time inventory. You have to be a just-in-time planner and leader. Like if you're not prepared to take advantage of the opportunities, protect yourself against the challenges, you're screwed.
Yeah, so that's interesting. We just finished our annual operating plan yesterday, where we delivered it to our employees and kind of our management leadership team. And it was funny when I was in there. I'm listening to everyone, what they're talking about, what we're planning, and there's a good chance that half that's thrown out the window in 3 months, and it's crazy at this point.
Yeah, I, like I said, I've kind of thought maybe the whole idea of an annual plan is becoming outdated. Maybe we really are thinking 90-day, and let's face it, even back in the days when an annual plan made sense, 90 days was sort of what you could really count on to get done, and then you were reevaluating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's possibly where we see permanent change in the environment. But as far as dine-in, like the occasion hasn't gone anywhere. That need, you're going to find out soon enough. That need, oh wait, can I announce that stuff during the podcast?
Yeah, of course you can.
That you're going to find out soon enough. That desire of like, I want to take my family out somewhere where we can all focus with each other. It gets harder and harder to do around the dinner table. Everything going on, that occasion hasn't gone away. So I'm still a believer in that. I think that's one of Buddy's strengths.
So obviously we're going to talk about we're going to talk about COVID. We're going to talk about how it's impacted Buddies. I find the pizza game to be an interesting place to be in during this, because I know I've ordered about my consumption of pizzas went up about 10x
right
since this happened. I mean, have you been able to counterbalance some of the negative effects? And I know Buddies is skewed as kind of a dine-in experiential place. It's why we love it. It is Detroit style pizza. It's where it all started. And, how have you been able to navigate, having a product that people are probably ordering more of, but also having a part of your business that's completely shut down? And what have you seen?
Look, it's been a phenomenal asset to have because, and people ask us all the time though, like, oh, you must be killing it. You're in pizza. And fundamentally and historically, Buddy's is 70% dine in. It's as much our salads and burgers and other things, even though we're famous for our pizza, and that's still what most people have. So it's been hard. I mean, we've had to adjust. We've had to do a lot, but clearly having a product that people think of as off-premise, they think of for carry-out and delivery, it travels well. Having a loyal following it's really helped us give at least the bottom hasn't been as bad as it might have been for some, but it doesn't mean it hasn't hurt.
We talked last year because Buddy's and Blake's are going on their 75th anniversary, both
crazy.
Both started in 1946. And at the time, you had big plans for expansion, and you probably still do. They might have been put on pause, but you were talking about a lot of middle markets in the Midwest. I think there was some talks of, I don't want to give away some of your secrets, but, you were looking to expand outside the state. And when you look at your expansion plans, are they put on pause? Are you leaning into it? What are you doing?
Yeah, we're on pause. I think early on, if you go back to the spring, when there was this sense, let's just get through this, it'll be short term. There wasn't that, I don't know when it happened for you, but for us it was about June, the dreaded, oh man, this isn't going away anytime soon. We were thinking maybe we opportunistically lean in. We've had to go into a little bit more survival mode, so we've paused some of that. It hasn't stopped us from thinking or taking advantage of this added time to maybe do a little bit more fundamental base building in preparation for that expansion, but that's still our goal.
So, one of the things I found within our business is we're really focusing on things that we probably wouldn't have taken time for otherwise. We're leaning into our marketing strategy, kind of bigger picture stuff that I think you can really lean into during this time, and kind of understanding, where you want to go with some of this stuff. When you look at, some of the things that you fundamentally, shifted focus from internally, what are some of the things that you guys are looking at? I know some businesses have went on pause, some have leaned into different parts of their business. What are the stuff that you've been able to focus on that otherwise, in normal times, normal operations, you just don't have the time to, because you're just trying to make the pizzas on time?
I think 3 big things have happened, call them silver linings or positive developments.
Sure.
One is just really looking at the whole operation and trying to do a better job of maybe systematize and codify what we have.
Sure.
You've got a 75-year business. It's been through a lot of iterations. Can we just kind of bottle the essence of what's important and get that down on paper so that we can grow and protect the brand? So that's one piece. The other is really, our off-premise business has doubled. So you're taking what used to be 30% of the business, double that amount through this small pipe. We've had to really kind of fundamentally think about stuff like curbside, packaging, different things like that. So I think there's been a lot of development there. And then last is some additional revenue streams. We've launched a product on Goldbelly. So you can now.
How's that work, by the way? Because we really looked at it. I talked with Grace from.
I heard that.
Yeah, and she's like, yeah, we do $1 million in Goldbelly. I was like, yeah, I should look at Goldbelly.
I mean, look, in the CPG space you're in, maybe it's different. For us, it's been great, I have to say. They're doing the fulfillment for us, and that's been a little bit of a learning curve because you give up a little control. That's been a challenge, but we're working through that and learning. But the ability to, let's face it, there's lots of Detroit expats living around the country.
They're everywhere, man.
When
I look at our e-commerce business, you know where they go. It's like North Carolina, Florida, Texas.
In my house.
And yeah, right, exactly.
So look, I think twofold. One, it's great to sell the product. It's great to build the brand that way, but it's also interesting to see maybe where do we have a following? Mm-hmm. Where are people interested in Buddy's? Because as we look to expand in the future, it's just nice to know maybe, hey, we didn't realize South Florida is that attractive. I mean, we did, but maybe we didn't.
Right. One of the things I wanted to ask you as well was, there's so many similarities to the Buddy's story and my family's company, 1946 family business. You've ran a lot of companies. You're an experienced CEO. You've been around the block. What's different about managing a store, a business with a legacy and a story like Buddy's has? Because Buddy's is iconic around here, and for people out of the Metro Detroit area who don't know, I mean, it is everyone had an experience at Buddy's. Everyone's proud to talk about it. It's, it's Detroit style pizza. It's kind of very Detroit. It feels like home, for us who live here. And I have to imagine that plays into some of your thinking and is probably different than some of the places you've come from before.
Yeah, first of all, I'm pretty sure you just called me old. Been around the block, but that's okay.
Well,
that's
you're
cool.
aging well. I was going to ask you what your workout regimen is. You look fit.
I try. That's my alcohol and exercise, or my stress management.
There you go.
System. No, look, it's walking a tightrope. It's super challenging because people already have an idea of what Buddy's is, and oftentimes it matches some, kind of nostalgic reality versus what it is.
Right.
I think as humans, when we think of the past, we remember the good stuff. We don't nearly remember as much of the bad stuff.
Right.
So, there's a pressure. I think on the other hand, you've got a reality, an authenticity that you are starting with. You don't have to make up a story. You see some of these, I call them boardroom concepts, where people get together and from
it's manufactured. It's manufactured.
Building one, it's how can we franchise and sell this, versus there's this true story that's been, kind of gone through the distillation process through time, and you just can't put, the value of that is unbelievable. So while you've got this precious thing you've got to take care of, I think it makes you a better leader. It makes you smarter and more thoughtful about your decision making. You can't just say, this is better for the bottom line, or this is the easier route. You have to say, what's the best way forward?
When you look at, you talked about different revenue streams. I think I cut you off a little bit, but you talked about, Gold Belly, and you talked about, different product offerings. Does this pandemic force you to think about, expanding what Buddy's is or what it isn't, or is it kind of a temporary move to kind of make the bottom not feel so deep?
Well, we were talking about it earlier. I think that's the future-proofing part, right? You've got optionality is, I think, so critical now, and it probably already was before the pandemic.
Yep.
But if you didn't already get that memo, you've gotten it now, that if you don't have another model to turn to or some other things that you can work on, you're putting yourself in a tough spot. You're rolling the dice. I know there's some businesses that probably if you're the manufacturer of masks, like, wow, you ran into something great, but you never know what's coming next. So I think, understanding those, I don't think we change fundamentally what Buddy's is about. It's about Detroit-style pizza. We've got a phenomenal product. It's about our people that make it and serve it. And it's how can we best execute that. Right now, it's a little uncertain. I think it'll look more like it's always looked like at some point. But, you've got to be ready for anything.
You talk about Detroit-style pizza. For those of us who, don't know what Detroit-style pizza really is, what is it and why is Buddy's the best? Well,
so I can speak to this because if you go back a few years, I didn't know anything about Detroit-style. I was like most of America. I didn't know anything about Detroit-style pizza and heard about Buddy's and Detroit-style pizza. And so I came to try it. And first of all, I was really blown away. It's really just a great pizza.
It's amazing.
A great pie. So then you start to dig in and you find out where Buddy's fits into this whole
story,
piece,
right?
Which is, it's the originator. In 1946 on Conant and 6 Mile, there was a little place called Buddy's Rendezvous, and it started off as a blind pig. It's just a place where some guys in the neighborhood can come together and have a few drinks, play some bocce, whatever they did, and hang out. And at some point, they decided, hey, this could be a better business. Maybe we need to serve a little food. Started making a few pizzas every day, and as legend has it, they started off using the pans from the automotive factories that used to hold parts, these steel pans. And that's really where the secret started, because you're putting this dough, this thick crust pizza, into this pan. It gets caramelized on the outside. The cheese hits up against the metal and gets caramelized. So you get this fluffy dough, but with this crunch. They topped it with Wisconsin brick cheese and topped a little sauce on it, and that became, at the time it wasn't called Detroit style, it was just Buddy's.
Right.
And I actually think it was in 1970 when the Jacobs family bought the business, and there was some citywide contest around the best pizza, and Buddy's won. And that's when it kind of went on the map as Detroit style, because they had to describe it somehow.
Sure. I knew of Detroit style. I didn't really think it was outside of Michigan. I thought it was like us trying to say, we got something like New York. We have something like Chicago. I'm out in fucking Vegas, and they're like, there's a Detroit style pizza Las Vegas, is the name of the company, and they're promoting. It's one of like the most popular pizza styles out there, and this place was packed. And I'm like, it's arrived. We have our own. We have our own thing.
It could be. I don't have the stats, but it could be the fastest growing style of pizza. I mean, it's popping up all over the place. I think that's where, I've been asked. So I'm not trying to put a question in your mouth, but are you worried about getting to market first and things like that? It's kind of interesting because you can look up Detroit style pizza on Wikipedia. It's going to say it started at Buddy's in 1946. So there's a bit of authenticity that nobody can take away from us.
Yeah, and you just got a little bit of that edge, when you're talking about it, and that means something, because what I've noticed in the alcohol space or even the entertainment space, I've always looked at Blake's as being a business of food, beverage, and entertainment, and we have work to do on the food side. But beverage and entertainment have been a big part of it. But the whole thing that's really worked for us is we didn't have to work too hard at our story, because our story is our history. Our story is what we do, what we embody. And, you see some of these companies coming out and they do it all right. But it's like, it was in a manufacturer in a boardroom. That it didn't have that struggle, which I think people appreciate about a business.
I don't mean it derogatory at all, but just sometimes there isn't the authenticity. Mm-hmm. And what I like about a brand like yours or ours is, it's authentic, and people can say anything. What the story is, the story, and the fact we're here 75 years later still doing it is remarkable. And I think the consumer knows it.
Mm-hmm. Well, they do, and I think that I don't think a lot of people give consumers enough credit, because I do think that they are nuanced in that understanding. I think from a macro level, you can kind of write that off, that people don't really care, don't really know. I think when you really get into it, how you get those raving fans, how you create a company that has value beyond just the product, it's the experience, it's the value proposition of why you want to come to Buddy's, not only because it's a great space and you guys do a great job, creating an environment that really, feels like a place you want to be, but you're also kind of buying into that story and that history and wanting to be a part of it a little bit. So,
well, let's face it, when you buy a consumer product, or you eat a Detroit style pizza or have a Blake cider, it's more than just, you're not just doing it because you're thirsty or eating the pizza because you're hungry. It's also about how it makes you feel. And I think when you can connect to a brand, and you get something good out of it, that's that added value that keeps people coming back.
And I was doing a little research on you specifically. Well, you provided a little bit in the intro, because we've met and I find you very charismatic and charming and intelligent business person. But it seems like your history.
Sorry.
Damn, lucky lady. The thing that I wanted to ask you was, you seem like you've been in. And correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you've been in the food world a lot of your life. Has it been all of your life?
Yeah, all my life.
And so how do you end up in food, first and foremost, and two, what do you like about it, and what are the challenges in it?
So going back to when we met and we sort of shared, at least you shared your life story. It's not that dissimilar, right?
Sure.
My grandfather was in the hotel business.
Okay.
Immigrated from Germany to escape World War I, and so my father grew up in his hotels and ended up in the restaurant and hotel business. And so, I can still remember my first day in the restaurant business. My mom announced to me, I think I was 14 or 15. She said, "Oh, by the way, you have a job this summer." I had no idea of that. You're going to be a busboy at one of your dad's restaurants. And the good news is it was fine dining, so I knew I was going to make some cash. Unfortunately, on the first night I was training, the dishwashers quit, so I got demoted immediately, and that was my inauspicious start in hospitality. But I never had any intention to go into this business. It looked way too hard. I was
Hours are crazy.
Any teenage kid, I don't want to do what my dad does.
Right.
And then you go to school, and I didn't care so much not to take a job in the summers. And then you get done and you're like, well, what the hell do I do now? And so ended up in the business, and I'm really pleased I got to start off an independent. I think you learn a lot about entrepreneurialism. You really learn about finance. You learn about hospitality. But I think I always knew, I kind of liked, believe it or not, the chain management, the more corporate world, only because you had the chance to really create. You weren't limited by, hey, you've got one restaurant, you're there every day. Maybe 10 years later, you have a second restaurant. And I love growth. I just like building a team. So
I was going to say that, one of the things is, it's interesting when you come from my experience in the craft, alcohol world is there's a connotation sometimes that big is bad and that growth is bad. And there's something, great about, keeping it small. And I believe that, that there's all sorts of answers to that. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's not. But one of the things that I always found was I like the idea of growth because I like the idea of opportunity, and not only opportunity for the business, but the people within the business, the ability to scale a story, tell a story. And I love the one location. I get it. And it's like, and people put their heart and souls of it. And that's really the essence of entrepreneurism and individuals who put it all on the line to try to make it happen. But when you have the opportunity to take that and you have the ability to grow that, it's something that can affect so many more people. And to me, it's always been that's when it gets exciting, because you can really think about how that has impact beyond just one community.
Well, especially, and you're like me this way, when you want to do the right thing and your goal is about making a difference, to do it on a larger scale makes sense. Look, the single unit is charming. There's a bit of glamour around it because we watch Top Chef or something and we think, but the truth is it's still one unit. And look, that I love going. I love that. I know Mabel Gray is one of my favorite restaurants in town, and you had them on. So I'm a huge fan of supporters.
Shout out to James. He's good stuff.
I always just felt I was better at doing this. The how do you create opportunity for more? How do you grow? I love the creative element of it. So I think in a lot of cases we're all trying to do the same thing. You just find where you fit in, and where you feel like you can have the most impact. And for me, pretty early on, I saw that sort of in that scaling things up was where I could be my best. Yeah.
So on that note, does Buddy's have any vision of franchising? And if so, can I sign up for like half the state and get in on the action?
You're at the top of the list, Andrew. Yeah. Look, back to what I said about optionality.
Yeah.
I think we want to explore how can we stay true to who we are and continue to expand in a way that we can control it, that we can be the same version of Buddy's that everyone's grown to love over 75 years. So that means, franchising might be a little more difficult because you do lose some control. So we would not do that if it meant that. But on the other hand, we're not going to say no to something that we don't fully understand yet.
Sure.
I think we don't yet have a model that probably makes sense, that we do feel we could stay true to our roots, but we continue to look at ways to grow. And you can't turn your back on that because it's something you have to understand. So I would say we're open to everything. The only thing I know that works is the current, model that we have, that we've proven. So we'll continue to move forward slowly with that and explore other options. Did I dance around that enough?
It was perfect. Yeah, it was eloquent in dodging my question, but I want on the list if it happens. So
for sure.
And you kind of make a point, and I noticed as being an observer of Buddy's, you're going through. It seems like you are staying true to your roots, but you're also going through a transformation in your own right of your own model, and talk a little bit about. The transition from what was to the to be, because I do see, a menu that's changing and evolving in a great way. New concepts being added to kind of the model. So, when you got on board, what was that approach, and how did you kind of address that? Because you offer more than just pizza. And people like a lot of things from Buddy's, not just pizza.
Well, first of all, I think you have to think back. There's no way Buddy's got from 1946 to 2021 without evolving and some changes. And I've known, for instance, some of our specialty pizzas, you'll take one off the menu and people, they get really upset. It's their favorite pizza. And it harkens back. Well, you've always had this, and you look back, you're like, well, we've had it for 3 years. So sometimes you have to keep the perspective, but evolution has always been there. If you're not growing, there's not a lot of restaurant brands that make it 75 years. There's a handful. Really, I've done this with people. Like, name all the restaurants, chains you can think of 75 years or older.
I don't think I could answer that. I don't know. I don't think I know one.
There's a few, but not many.
Yeah.
Very few in like full service. So the only way you get there is because you evolve. I think what we decided is, how do we stay? What's the core? And for us, the core is our pizza, our Detroit-style pizza, is that we make the dough in-house multiple times a day. It's hand-stretched. It's double-proofed. That's not going to change. The quality of our ingredients, not going to change. Whether or not we have Thousand Island dressing, I don't think that's at the core of Buddy's. So you figure out right away what's in on the field to consider makes the business better or not, and does it allow you to better execute on that core. So that's how we've kind of used as our compass. And so when people get worried, they're like, oh, Buddy's is changing. I remind them, the pizzas and the salads, that's why you've been coming here for so many years. That's not changing.
Right.
We might evolve a little bit, try a limited time only pizza, some things like that, but that's always been a part of Buddy's. But so yeah, we have to continue to evolve.
Sure.
Otherwise, same thing. Menu proliferation to me is the reason most full service casual themed dining restaurants have declined, because they don't stand for anything anymore.
Yeah.
You go to some of these, and I'm not going to name some of the names, but you're like, what is their cuisine?
Everything's Denny's, right? Like
it's got everything.
No offense to Denny's, they eating there hungover a million times. But it's kind of like you just have too many options. It's not focused in a direction.
I don't think you can be all things to all people.
Right.
And I think if you try to be, you're going to be mediocre. And I think it's way too competitive out there to be mediocre. So figure out what's your core, what you stand for, and then go execute on that like fiercely.
Yeah, this is a tough question for me to ask, because it almost feels wrong asking it. But I feel someone who we can be honest with each other and kind of talk about it. But businesses are hurting. Restaurants have taken more of a hit than most industries. I mean, I think probably more than all. And there's a lot of restaurants that aren't coming back. That affects our business in a degree, and it affects our communities and all of that. And it's truly a sad story. When we come out of this, though, what does that look like? From a competitive landscape. I mean, is there going to be opportunity for the ones that were able to weather the storm, to be able to grow, to be able to scale? Even opportunities that weren't there before for people looking to get in. I mean, how do you look at that landscape? And you might have facts better than I, but when you see an industry that's been so affected by this tragic pandemic, how do you look at that? Because it's kind of a loaded question, because it's sad. It's you can't get around it.
You can't get around it. I mean, we can color it in a lot of ways and rationalize. We could say, well, maybe it was oversat and we were due for a culling. But look, these are livelihoods. These are people's businesses. These are employees. So it's a tragedy. But there's lots of tragedy out there associated with COVID. Like, right. I mean, we've been, this is a little bit of an aside. I'll get back to that. But we've started doing some regular work with the Pope Francis Center, feeding the homeless. And, I remember I was talking to Father Tim, and he's like, oh, this is so great, your generosity, especially in an industry that's hurting so bad. And I said, it's like we're all in a different boat. We're clearly in the same storm, but there's always someone that's got it worse off or a bigger challenge. So it's a tragedy all around. Like, that's just full stop. I think, look, there's so much hyperbole also out there. I don't think we know what the competitive landscape is going to look like. Clearly, there's going to be fewer seats. There just are. I just don't have a sense of the scope. You hear people put out stats about what % of restaurants have closed and such. We just don't know. And that's what's a little bit tough to figure out at this point. So I think it's we move forward. I think there'll be opportunity. I think there'll be opportunity for people to re-enter the marketplace. And for those of us still in it, there should be a larger share. But I don't know how many people are going to not go out anymore. So it's anyone's guess.
I could be naively optimistic, but my sense is that people want to get back to normal, and I can't imagine a world in which over call it another 12-month, 18-month period that people aren't back to where they are. If we continue to do the right things, and businesses and people continue to work towards that end, I have to imagine that some of the first things everyone's going to want to do is to come back to a busy restaurant. And, that energy. I mean, I love, getting takeout with my wife more, just like everyone else. But, there's something about that energy, that feeling. There's a game on in the background. There's people, there's something going on in the city. There's that energy that you thrive off of. And to miss that, I mean, you feel a little, incomplete to some degree, because that's the kind of community aspect that you need, and that's what restaurants do. That's what they bring.
Yeah, you sure hope so. I mean, personally, what I want, I think, we've figured out, if anything, we have to be patient.
We're all taking a lesson.
Yeah, I mentioned to you earlier, I Actually, Katie, who I work with, gave me for Christmas the book Endurance on the voyage of Shackleton down Antarctica. And a lot of schools have done sort of a business case study using this book. And I realized as you're reading it, like 80% of their time, they were just sitting on an ice floe, waiting for it to break up and for there to be ocean to sail in. And patience was one of like the defining leadership qualities that he carried through this. And I was like, man, that is so appropriate for what we're in right now, because that's where I think people want the hot take. They want to make a decision. This is what's going to look like. Let's run after it. But the reality is nobody knows. We've never done this before. So we're going to be back at it. I think people have that desire for community and communion, and they're going to be back out. And I don't think that's gone away. If anything, it's pent up now.
It is, for sure. I always try to ask this question to people that I believe that are smarter than me in this regard. And
someone else coming on
for the for the farmer in me. Can you give some sort of your opinion of something that I've been trying to figure out? And I understand it, and I think the answer is liquidity from the federal government. But how do you see, why is there such a disconnect between Main Street and Wall Street? As far as, we're seeing record. It just keeps going up, and it seems like there's, maybe it's always already been priced into the market, but how do you see what's happening on the street level? Seeing, you're down in Detroit, you see restaurants shut down, businesses shut down. It's slower, full stop. There's less people down here than I've seen in 10 years, and it better than I. And then you look at Wall Street and you're like, holy shit,
Oh man,
you can't make a bad choice, on the stock market right now. And I know you're a pizza guy and I'm an apple guy. I'm a farmer, so maybe we're not the right guys to be asking this, but any idea on why that seems to be so disconnected, or what?
All I can do is regurgitate things I've heard and stuff about. This isn't a business downturn. This is due to the pandemic. So the fundamentals of what underpins a bearable market are different. All that stuff.
Sure.
But I don't know anything about that. What I do think is that, where is that big pension fund going to move that money to? Like, there's a little bit of what is driving the stuff. There's just so much money there. Mm-hmm. You now have all of the quantum traders and all of this stuff. I just wonder if it's just working in a parallel universe from what's going on. But I think also what we just talked about was the pent up demand. Like, I don't know that, obviously this has been a lost year, and we'll never get that back. But I think there still remains the optimism you talked about that it will be back, and it's not going to face a financial structural hurdle to get back. It's really just faces, can we get enough people vaccinated, or what? At the estimates on how many are reported versus had, around 100 million people have had COVID and probably have some immunity. At some point we're going to hit that herd immunity. Yeah. Knock on wood. And then that's what's holding it back, so that there's not an actual structural reason for the downturn. That's my best guess, but again,
hey, it's pretty good for a pizza guy. I'm a pizza guy. Yeah, that's fair. I wanted to talk to you a little bit. You and I were talking, before the show started, and we were kind of talking about balance. And I know that you have some surfing philosophy that I love, and I want to talk to you a little bit as I look at my evolution from going out of college to this disorganized kind of mess, trying to
your dorm room blind pig.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. From that to I think this last year we had like 850 employees, and so it's this big transition, and you look to find balance, and it seems like successful CEOs always seem to be able to find some sort of way to balance their family, their professional lives. And what are some of the things that you've implemented into your life? Because you seem fit, you seem mindful, you seem very present, and I guess I'm just curious, what are some of the things, some of the tactics that you've been able to do to kind of weather the storm? Because it gets exhausting. I found myself in many valleys and many peaks in this whole thing. It's a roller coaster. So,
well, I think you've already hit on the first thing you need to do, which is recognize it. Yeah. Like that it is a challenge. It's hard. There's no one solution. I think probably and I figured this out pretty early on, and started like kind of preaching it a little bit. But I think people think of that balance as like these scales, and it's somehow if one goes up, the other goes down. And I figured out it's not zero sum that way. That like if you're like turned on and fired up about what you're doing at work, man, you come home with so much more energy, or you hit the gym, or you have these other passions that are lifted up by that. And similarly, if you're just beat up at home and like you're just not happy with your health or what you're doing, you don't suddenly run into work and you turn it on and you're this great leader. So I think you just try and not have such a division between the two.
Sure.
Just be the best you, and that does have its ebb and flow.
Yeah.
But it's just focus on how do you get better every day? How do you do the best you can? Be kind to yourself. I mean, I think that's what most people need to do better.
Yeah.
Is stop beating the crap out of yourself internally, and just be kind and go at it as hard as you can.
Yeah. One of the things I always said is, and I kind of threw this idea, you talked about the scales, and I was trying to do that for, the first part of my, early to mid 20s. And I realized that, I don't really, it's not a professional life, personal life. It's all just your life. And it just has to work in kind of an elevated fashion on all platforms. But you really can't be like, here's my work hat, here's my family hat, here's my health hat, it's all kind of just this one thing that kind of comes together and helps you, hopefully, in all aspects if you're doing it right.
Well, and you got to decide, you can use the scoreboard that like the world, universe wants to give us, which is how productive were you, which might be how much money did you make, or what promotion did you get, or maybe how many data entries did you make on a spreadsheet, versus what's the quality that you put into it, what's the intent you had towards it. Maybe I think sometimes you have to redefine the scoreboard. Mm-hmm. It's the same is true with your family. Is your family success based on the college your kid gets into, or what kind of person they are?
Right.
And it's hard to reset because the world likes things they can measure.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think most of the important stuff, whether that's happiness or love or wealth, and that doesn't have to be money, how do you measure that? What's the number?
Right.
Like, there's no number. So the important stuff can't be measured. So you got to get out of that game in your own head.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's really well said. Talking about measurements, when you look at motivating and, incentivizing, kind of, and, your work staff, how many employees do you, pre-COVID did you have?
1,200.
Okay. So, that's a lot of people. Do you have a specific philosophy on KPI management, number management? Do you have a specific, operating philosophy within the stores? I know that, numbers make the world go round, and I guess I'm just curious if there's a particular operating system that you kind of try to employ with your individual businesses, because that's a lot of people to manage, to all get to row in the right direction. Well, so how do you get culture? I guess ultimately the question is, how do you get culture and direction all heading to true north, which is obviously the company's vision, when you're spread across so many locations at scale, with so many people?
Well, there's inputs and outputs in that question, right?
Yep.
I think the outputs are the lagging indicators, which are important, though. They're things like, what are your comp sales year over year? Tells you about the health of the business. Is it growing? What are you doing? It's like on like, so you get a good sense of it. Turnover numbers are fantastic. Are people, do they want to work here? Are they going somewhere else? And you can compare that to what's going on out in the marketplace. So those are sort of lagging. Those are outputs. I think the inputs are as much around communication. And some of it's as simple as, do you just treat people decently? Do you take care of them? I think you want to take certain things out of the equation, like people having to worry, am I making enough money? Am I doing this? Like, try and make it, those fundamentals good. Mm-hmm. But more often, people want to know what they're connected to, why they're doing it, who they're working for. So you've got to be present. You've got to be out there. And I don't think it's a single system. I don't think it's a single thing you can say. I think it goes back to a word we used earlier, authentic. Mm-hmm. As a leader, if you can be authentic and your intent is right, more often than not, you're going to end up with a good culture. And you have to allow that to be different. I have to tell you, I've worked in a number of places. All have had a really strong culture, but all a very different culture.
Right.
And same thing. Coming to Buddy's, I'm not looking to install a culture. I'm looking to learn the culture, understand it, and then allow it to flourish. And all you can do is come in and be authentic.
Yeah. Culture, people talk about it. It's the special sauce, and is that just kind of an amalgamation of all the people within the business and the experiences that ultimately kind of create it, and can you change it, or is it?
Yeah, look, I think you can influence it,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you can do a gap analysis. I think where people go wrong is deciding this is what I want the culture to be and then forcing it. I think you
Right.
Take a look and measure and ask yourself, what is the culture today? What do we think the best version of that is? And then you try and kind of influence it. And I really think it's a lot like, again, as you're going to learn, having a family. You know, if I ask people like, hey, what's the culture of your family? They're like, what do you mean? It's us.
That's like just what we do.
That's what it should be. It should be family, and that it's almost hard to define. I think the easier it is to define, maybe the less authentic the culture is.
Yeah, it's packaged. It has no heart, no soul. Yeah.
But you can come up with, and I think if you, even with your family, you dig in, you can come up with, what do we value? What's important to us? What do we want to be about? Who are we? Mm-hmm. And you could come up with something. You just don't ever put it on paper and articulate it.
Right.
But so I think it's the same. And so I think you can do a bit of a gap analysis and influence it. But I don't think you can come in and just decide this is going to be our culture.
Right. When you look to other companies in the food space, the beverage space, just entrepreneurs in general, I've always, whether this is good or not, and it's not that I measure myself against certain people, but there's people that I really look up to, and they are kind of the inspiration, and you kind of try to study them. I've always been a big believer that, you don't have to do this alone. There's people who've already figured it out. There's people that have paved the path, and obviously you might take a slightly different path, but there's general direction that you can really take from someone. Is there an organization, a person that you've really looked to that has given you kind of guidance, maybe, personally or professionally?
I mean, I think I've picked up a little bit from so many people, and I think sometimes there's so many people that, and like, I think every business has something that's really interesting and unique, and they're doing well. It kind of becomes overwhelming.
Right.
And sometimes and I don't think this is necessarily a positive. I'll retreat back to that. Okay, just do you, go with what you know, be the best you, because it becomes overwhelming to try and elevate myself to something completely different and think, I want to be like this person or that person or have this kind of organization, and it becomes a little overwhelming. So I don't know if there's one individual. I will tell you, and it goes along with the title of this podcast, there is nothing I'm telling you that I didn't steal from someone else.
Yeah.
So
biggest form of flattery, right?
Yeah.
I like what they did there.
And then carry it on.
Yeah. And you're going to put your own spin on it. That's what I always said. Like, how many original ideas are there? I mean, obviously that there are, but so much of what we can do as humans, as entrepreneurs, is kind of take, best practices and then put your own spin on it, and it becomes yours. It's copy with pride and then make it your own. And I don't think there's any shame in doing that. It's like, don't be too prideful. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to do. And if there's smarter people than some farmer from Armada that's figured it out.
And if you're doing it right, it's less dependent on us as leaders, because you've got, a great product for you, Insider, for us in Detroit style pizza. You've got this loyal following. You've got a killer team around you they're working their ass off. Like, you get all that. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not as dependent on our philosophy or what we say. Now it's give it room to breathe and grow.
Right. One thing I wanted to ask you as well, there's a lot of things I wanted to ask you. I got like 3 pages of notes. But for us at Blake's, one of the things that allowed us to manage and weather the storm during COVID was this real move towards leaning into digital, whether it's digital experience, order, curbside pickup, even having, more digital applications within the restaurant.
Right.
Obviously I really like the human element, but I think there's advantages during this time to that. And what can you say about, and you look at just the companies that have been able to maintain and be successful during this time, and if you're e-commerce based, if you're digital based, you have a real leg up in this current situation. No bones about it. So how do you see restaurants, pizza, kind of your concept? What are the things you are doing, and what are the things you think you need to be doing more of? Kind of given what this last year's taught us.
Well, first of all, the last year's been like crazy in the digital space. Let ask you a question. Is your inbox now like almost 100% digital cold calls for some new service or system or product? I'm like,
it's too much.
It used to be a couple a week.
Yeah.
It's
insane.
Half a dozen a day.
Yeah.
So I think while it's been maybe a short-term boon, I don't know that now the competition hasn't gone tenfold what it was on all these different digital platforms you might want to be on. So yeah, we've had to, certainly in off-premise, whether it's through curbside, or fortunately we had already moved to a third-party delivery platform and had gone exclusive, so we had kind of tightened up some things there prior to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So clearly we're still trying to figure out, almost because the ecosystem has become so convoluted. There's so many different products that have overlap or gaps. Trying to navigate it is a little crazy. We're still working on some things. We've launched a loyalty program. We have in-app ordering now. We have curbside with communication, two-way text, like all stuff we didn't have before the shutdown. I think, though, there's still room to continue to figure it out. We had also, I should say, and I don't know how much you have, we had already started to pivot to much more of our marketing being digital.
Right.
We're an old school company. We were still doing a lot of print and radio. When I came in, we were already going that way. This thrust us 100%, which was kind of good. That was good news. So
we're exactly the same, because you can actually measure digital. You know, there's a lot more feedback in that loop, you know, compared to kind of some of the traditional methods. But we're also trying to balance that, because we're a people company.
Yeah.
You know, that's the weird thing about, you know, you take some of these trending ideas and philosophies within, whether they're coming from Silicon Valley or it's just, you know, it's kind of the way the world's going. I've always looked at it as, you know, people aren't going anywhere, and we serve people, and that's what we do. And so some degree, where there always has to be that human element in everything we do, from marketing to our, you know, to the services we offer. And, you know, for us, it's a weird balance of, you know, yes, digital makes all the sense for all these other reasons, but, you know, our business was built. I think about how Blake's Hard Cider was built. It was built Tommy boying, you know, from state to state, door to door, you know, sitting in bars like this, you know, doing samplings. I don't know how many, you know, restaurants throughout the country I've been at doing samplings and pairings and whatnot. And it's just like, you know, that's how it was built. So I don't know how it's not all digital. It's not all going to be there, you know.
It's the Goldilocks principle, right? Yeah. Goldilocks principle. You don't want to go from here to there. It's finding the right in the middle. And I'll give you a good example of something that I see happening for us this year. So we've gone really hard digital and social for marketing, but we're also looking at how do we do maybe more in restaurant guest activation. So it's giving out the Buddies mug on Father's Day, and some of these things that you get the analog and the digital combining, because I think it's both, right? You got to have both. You can't be one or the other, and that's the fine tuning that we're still trying to figure out, because it's a lot more economically feasible, and as sometimes as Machiavellian as people think it is when they're served up these ads that are like, whoa, how did I just get that? It's tailored. You know, you were interested, you're going to get this. You don't want it, you don't need it, whatever. Right. It makes more sense. But we've still got to find some way to connect people to the brand, because that's how we've been around 75 years, right?
Right. You know, that's a great segue into to one of the questions that I had for you, which is, you know, when you look at your horizon here at Buddies, you know, if there's one thing that you could say that you want to leave, you know, Buddies with, and I don't know if that's 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, but what's your goal for the organization from a personal perspective? What's the mark you'd like to leave on the company?
I'll leave it better than I found it. Yeah. I think, you know, that's the simple headline answer. But I think it's, you know, look, I think this is such a phenomenal brand. I think it's got such roots in Detroit. I think that we have the opportunity to also export a little bit of what Detroit is all about. You know, it's kind of the same thing. How does a restaurant brand survive 75 years? It's some grit, it's some pride, it's a great product, you know, and that all kind of feels to me the same trajectory as the city is on. A little bit of a road bump, speed bump here. So I'd like to see us realize some of those dreams. Like let's take Buddies to the rest of the Midwest. Let's see it grow and flourish, and provide more opportunity for people, and maybe whether it's the Michiganders that are expats, or it's people who don't really know much, learn a little bit about Detroit and about how we do pizza.
Yeah, you know, I wanted to ask you, because I think that there's such a culture here for those of us who've grown up. You've recently, you know, become a Michigander, Detroiter. You know, you're a coastal gentleman, you know, before, And, what's your take of the Midwest, and specifically what's your take of Detroit and Michigan? What from someone who's, we get a little jaded here. We're told we're nice, and, we're not as in shape as the people on the coast, and, but we're super friendly. And so, just curious what your take is on us Midwestern folk.
Well, I think everyone who shows up is surprised. Like when you just have the connotation of Detroit, Midwest just doesn't pop in your mind unless you're from here.
Yeah.
And so you show up and you're thinking Detroit, hard edge, gritty, and then you couple that with Midwestern, you're like, oh wow, what an interesting juxtaposition. You then start to dig in and really understand the history of Detroit. And sure, everyone knows Motown and they know Cars and Ford, all this stuff, but you start to really dig into all that Detroit was in its heyday and what an impact on American culture it's had. You kind of start to get where the pride comes from, because that's the piece that I think threw me the most, was the really deep-rooted pride that anyone that grew up here has for their city and their community. And to me, that's just like, how can you not help but love that?
Yeah. The other thing that that we always take pride in, and I don't think it's, exported or understood across the country, is, it's a hotbed for artists, because I do believe it's gritty and there's a little bit of a struggle. And, it's got beautiful landscapes when you get outside, the city, and there's so much to offer as far as water frontage and different, geographies within the state. And, you look at the artists that have come out of here, and the musicians, artists, inventors, and it's just like, it is a hotbed for
creativity.
For creativity.
Yeah.
And, I think some of that's based in the struggle. And that's one of the things that I think is unique about this and unique about other Rust Belt cities, that it does provide that landscape of a little bit of that. It's not all rosy, 75 and sunny all the time. It's cold as shit outside. Right?
The new forest grows out of the forest fire, right?
Yeah,
and,
right.
And I think that's the silver lining also around COVID.
I was
all
just
of
gonna say that.
the stress and the tragedies for businesses, and yet there will be something better and something stronger out of it. And I think, again, that has quite a parallel to Detroit. So I think it's interesting. And I think, as we sit here and talk about different ways that people are innovating and trying to figure it out, I think a lot of great stuff will come out of our community.
Well, I think let's end on that, man. That feels
great.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for having me, and let's have some pizza.
I love it. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. You can find Everything Borrowed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Show your support and drop a 5-star review to help more people find our channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Stay up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and everythingborrowedpodcast.com. EBP is produced by Chelsea Cox, Jason Brown, and Vox Adams. Edited and filmed by Nick Ferguson. Art is by Adam Yarborough. Everything Borrowed is an After Hours Media production. Copyright 2021.